You can't talk about commissars in 40K without acknowledging the big three. Commissars Ibram Gaunt, Caiaphas Cain, and Sebastian Yarrick. Yet all three share a common flaw. Their main priorities weren't being commissars. Gaunt was busy leading a regiment. Cain openly admits to caring for his own survival above all else. And Yarrick was busy defending a hive city from Mork's toughest git, firing his biggest crumps. So let's talk about a commissar whose main duty is just that. Being a commissar, that being Commissar Viktor Hark. Hark is attached to Gaunt's regiment as a political officer because Lord General Lugo had an oopsie that led to an important cathedral blowing up, and Gaunt had the blame pinned on him. Hark, at this point, is attached as a commissar so Gaunt can focus on commanding the regiment. Throughout his time with the Ghosts, we see how Hark acts as a commissar, and this is what we'll be going over. Hark is described as a heavyset man with a head that rises from his neck like a bullet, with a calm and passive demeanor. He's said to be a man that's downright draconian with the rules and looks like he's trying to find an excuse to shoot you. Typical commissar, right? Well, not so much. In reality, these are his only traits that scream commissar. For one, he isn't zealous about the imperial faith. Two, the man can read the atmosphere of the troops and notice cracks that can lead to morale issues. This becomes apparent when he recognizes the divide between the Tanith and Vergastites, while Gaunt was ignorant to just how severe it was and could become. He not only knows Gaunt's track record, but knows the basics of every ghost in the regiment and their personalities and skills. He views them as tools of warfare, not just basic cannon fodder. Hark puts this to use by being charismatic and changing his manner of speaking on a trooper-by-trooper basis, like a social chameleon that would impress Cain. Being able to have rapport with a cutthroat like Ron, but not appearing uptight and even able to make a joke about Ron at his expense and get away with it. He could inspire confidence in new leaders like Raglan, who were shaken from previous disasters by making jokes and instilling loyalty for the Tanith that needed help for Raglan to lock in for this operation, or by simply being professional with the veterans and simply talking shop as he knows they can do their job. He was also adept at appearing in the middle of a conversation and saying something that was in line with the topic at hand, giving the impression that he's always around. I know this sounds like basic leadership, but it's such a common trope for commissars to be cloak and dagger jackasses that follow the law to the letter in a fashion Barney Fife would find excessive, and are all too willing to stay behind the troops with a pistol in hand, ready to blast troopers. Not to mention, commissars are way too comfortable with contradicting commanders, as technically commanders don't have any authority over commissars. However, that doesn't stop commissars that cross the line and end up falling on their bayonets multiple times when they push this too far. Hark never really had to worry about this because he saw Gaunt's leadership style and performed his commissarial duties in a manner that complemented Gaunt's leadership style. Hark's relationship with Gaunt is like a 10-year grizzled sergeant on the police force that's trying to keep paperwork from ending up on the captain's desk, and if told to do something, would accomplish it even if it meant the rules get muddy. The former caused problems as Gaunt didn't like being blindsided with news that one of his troopers was going to be executed, and Hark wasn't even bothering with the investigation, as he didn't view it as necessary. That said, when told to find any evidence to free the trooper, Hark came through, though this was by convincing a former guardsman to lie on the witness stand. This was done without Gaunt's knowledge, and Gaunt was less than stoked to find this out. But it goes to show the man would go to great lengths to back his commander, something most commissars wouldn't bother with since they're under no obligation to help the commanders. Even with the occasional hiccups, Gaunt would admit it was nice having Hark there to perform the commissarial duties, and occasionally call Gaunt out on his shenanigans. Hark isn't one to hide from a fight either. The man on numerous occasions has been seen walking into battle, blasting heretics left, right, and center with a plasma pistol, not only rallying troops, but directing them in a competent manner with sound tactics. The Mad Lad once stood his ground trying to rally troops when a heretic Bane Blade joined the battle. However, he needed to be reminded by Gaunt not to shoot Gaunt's ghost willy-nilly, followed by, and I quote, "It's a fething Bane Blade. I'd run too," though I don't think Hark would have followed through, and I'll explain why shortly. First, we need to mention how Hark got really unlucky and had to have his left arm replaced with an automatic after his flesh one got sliced off by a Luxaddle. Think of the drones in Halo 2 with the brute spike guns. Next, let's look into how Hark was under a different commander from Gaunt. Well, part of this may have been because of losing his arm, but he kind of went from grizzled cop to jaded cop that's sick of this shit and just wants to make it a retirement. This was apparent when during a rout, he threatened to shoot retreating tankers. When they ignored him, he simply turned away. When questioned about it by his new commander, Colonel Lucien Wilder, he stated, "If they're scared enough to ignore me, my rank, and my weapon, then they're too scared to be of any use," then calls out Wilder for wanting him to shoot them out of anger. This comes to a head when later, Hark cuffs the commander of an armored column to a chimera for retreating over a single landmine, breaking up the Ghost's line as a result, and then calling in a mass gunship strike that was danger close to the Ghosts. In short, being a bitch. Wilder wants to beat the commander when the marshal of the main force comes up and tells the commander while he was new, that was a bitch move, but being cuffed and called out in front of his men was punishment enough, and reminds Colonel Wilder he's not one to direct punishment. Hark then reminds the marshal he also isn't one to direct punishment, and that it's the job for the commissar. He then turns and shoots the commander in the head with an auto pistol in front of everyone. Tells them there won't be ignorant cowards in the Emperor's army, especially those that are officers. Warns the second in command he better straighten up, and walks off like it's lunchtime. He later explains to Wilder that because the officer was the cause of the rout, that it would not solve the problems of morale to shoot the troopers that were merely paying for their commander's lack of bravery and competence. I know, leadership actually being held accountable and frontline troops not being shat on. The story just really gave off vibes that Hark was sick of politics and didn't mind using his badge of office to call out high-ranking people on their shit. Speaking of being sick of things, Hark also on 3 separate occasions had to fight multiple tankers that were pissed he executed their commander, with the last fight involving him being attacked with a chain fist. He pins the guy to the wall and tells him giving up means the difference between a penal colony and death. The guy promptly gives up, and Hark proceeds to crack his skull because his thought process was 30 years in a penal colony will go by quick if you're simple-minded from a head injury. Then 2 minutes later, he saves his junior commissar from getting killed by shooting the head off a thug and asking if the rest of the gang wanted to try him. All of this because Hark was trying to pull out one of the troopers who had a bit of a gambling problem. Lastly, you see him train Junior Commissar Ludd and how he tries to push Ludd into being a proper commissar when he had to field promote Ludd into acting commissar after Hark got his back roasted by a flamer. First, by calling Ludd out for not putting himself into positions to deal with conflict, followed by slapping him for being too friendly with troopers when there needs to be a line, and finally to not be afraid and not back down when his authority is challenged. This last part is significant because Ludd does just that by grilling Hark for not talking about the dreams he's been having. I can't emphasize how nice it is to see a commissar be just that, a commissar, and a competent and effective one at that, and it doesn't fall into those tropes of just being the antagonist of the story for the good guys, whose priority is the overall morale of the regiment. Again, I'm not saying the big 3 I mentioned before were bad commissars. They all have the qualities you would want in one. However, their stories were about things more grand than focusing solely on morale and discipline in their respective regiments. And while there are other commissars that share some of Hark's qualities too, we've got to see Hark shine more than any of the others. As a result, we've got to see some really great moments that make you like and respect commissars who aren't the main character in the story. So that's why Hark will be the best commissar in my book. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe as always, and I'll see you next time out in the warp.